In the aftermath of violent protests in Portland, Oregon last month, the city is planning a major law enforcement response, including the FBI for dueling rallies of members of Antifa and the Proud Boys.
But why is the FBI involved? According to new reporting by TYT Investigates, leaked documents reveal some of the Bureau's official counterterrorism priorities have included, quote, black identity extremists, anti-authority extremists, and animal rights environmental extremists. Joining us to expand on these findings is the senior reporter for TYT Investigates, Ken Klippenstein. He joins us now via Skype. Great to see you, Ken.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
What was significant about the documents that you were able to get your hands on?
Well, I should point out that this genesis of the story was in Foreign Policy, a report that came out a little over a year ago that found that the FBI was using this designation, Black Identity Extremist, and that sort of piqued my interest. And so I started reaching out to some of my sources within the FBI, and what we ended up finding was not just that they had this designation, but that they continue to have it through 2019 and fiscal years 2020, even after the Bureau told Senate Democrats that they had dropped the term. It looks like they just moved the term and all of the constituent definitions under a more innocuous sounding one, but kept basically all of the contents of it.
Mm-hmm. So Ken, I think the genesis of this was of course, the attacks on the police officers in Dallas, Texas in 2016. I think that was the genesis for this. But I think you pointed out in the report that white supremacy extremists or white identity extremists were classified at a different threat level. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. This was prior to 2019 and 2020 when they ended up collapsing both the white supremacist threat and the black identity so-called threat under the same term, which I found interesting in itself, given the relative number of fatalities is a huge difference in scale, and that's even the FBI documents themselves show that.
Mm-hmm.
So did the documents basically reflect the fact that the FBI was classifying a much higher threat level, black identity extremism, of which we've seen very little, and basically underplaying the threat posed by white supremacy? Is that kind of what these documents get to?
I think it's a little more subtle. They ended up conflating the two and putting them into the exact same category, which is wild because if you look at the categories, they cite examples and sort of some rationale for why they're considering these groups a threat, and the documents show that they considered, quote, black identity extremists a top counterterrorism priority. And to equate black identity extremists with white supremacists, they could not produce a single example of fatality that resulted from black identity extremists, whereas they were able to produce a bunch of different examples for white supremacist extremists.
Well, what about that shooting in Dallas, Ken? I mean, I don't want to undermine, I think there was a legitimate reason to start this on the FBI. I do think the moral equivalence or the equivalency on it is gross, but let's not to say that it's not nothing, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And You're certainly right that there was there was that case. And but what's interesting is, they cite as the genesis of this term the Ferguson protests, which was sort of surprising to me. Because when you look at the case that you mentioned in Dallas,
mm-hmm.
I don't see any continuity between that horrible attack and the things that the demonstrators in Ferguson were saying.
Right.
So what is the practical implications of collapsing these two extremist threats into one category?
Well, one thing that was incredible was it ended up getting listed at the top of the FBI's counterterror priorities, above even Al-Qaeda and other terror affiliates, foreign Islamist terror affiliates like that. And I found that surprising as well, because, as you point out, it's not like there's zero threat from these groups. And, there was the Dallas shooting. But, when I think about that in relation to, say ISIS and things like that, I have to say, I don't see how you can prioritize that above it.
Yeah, that makes zero sense here. Is the general sense that you're getting here is that the counterterrorism priorities on the domestic level are just a total mess? Is that the FBI just has not been thinking about this. That is from the, so I used to cover terrorism, quite a bit Islamic terrorism, but one of the things I noticed was that our counterterrorism apparatus just completely lost the abilities that we had in the 1990s that we developed after the Oklahoma City attacks to look at our own domestic threat here at home.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I feel like that's the tenor of the discussion. Certainly, with sources that I've talked to, but also in public. You have FBI Director Wray saying that most of the domestic extremism they're having to deal with right now is white supremacist groups. So I think you are seeing a sort of schizophrenia in terms of having had this war on terror approach, and then now seeing that there are legitimate terror threats that don't fall under that umbrella.
Does the FBI have the tools that they need to go after white supremacist violence and extremism as aggressively as they did Islamic radicalism?
Well, it sounds, if you look at the stuff that's being reported, and then, I can tell you that my sources don't think they have what they need. And it sounds like other folks from not just the FBI, but also the DHS and other, groups tasked with handling domestic counterterror stuff, they're also saying that they don't have the resources they need.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to see from Congress, which is, we passed all these broad counterterrorism authorities after 9/11, and now after an El Paso shooting, before things get to a 9/11 level-like event, let's give law enforcement what they need to get the job done.
Indeed, while protecting our civil liberties, of course. Ken, thank you so much for shining a light on this. We appreciate your work.
Thanks, Ken.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
We'll have more Rising after this.